Welcome back to Close It Now. Sam Wakefield here. This is episode number 2 of this 4-part series that we are doing. If you heard last week's episode, you heard some very intense moments. You heard some really great content. And so we're just going to hop right in. We don't need to do a long, big introduction. So we'll just give you the abbreviated version. So if this is the first episode that you're catching of this series, hit pause, go back last week, and listen to last week's episode first, because you can listen to this one a la carte. It's fine. You're going to get some massive value today, but it all builds on itself, right? So we're discussing this concept, this idea of roots and wings. So our guest today, he's back again, is Mr. Jimmie Jayes. He has been my personal business coach over the years. We've partnered in some things, and just overall, just all around great dude. And I'm honored and privileged to both call him a friend and mentor, and also have him on the show. And he is now officially the reigning champion of being on the podcast more than anyone else. And so, especially when you do a 4-part series, that jumps it up pretty quick. But thinking back to last week, everybody, I would love to hear. In fact, in the comment section, in the notes, I would love to hear what some of your big takeaways were. And then, as we continue through this journey of roots and wings, raising, unfragile kids, right? It also correlates, and I'm sure if you're like me, your brain, if you're an entrepreneur, you're in sales, all these things, your brain is constantly churning. Wow, this principle applies everywhere. It's family, it's your team, it's all of these things. So as we go through these, I want you to listen, and it could be these episodes you may have to listen to more than once, because I want you to view it through a couple different lenses. One is primarily, I want you to view it through the lens of your family. If you have a family now, or if you're planning on starting a family, or just think about your core family that you have with your, say, brothers and sisters and parents and all the things. But also view it through the lens of, what are my coworkers, what my employees, right? Where you're at in your business, because it correlates, it relates, and it's interesting, and it's wild how the principles apply to both places equally. So, with that being said, thanks for having us for having us. Thanks for being on this show again, Jimmie.
My pleasure, man. Super happy to be here with you, and couldn't think of a better thing to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everybody that didn't know, this is actually, as you know, I'm super transparent here. This is the second time to record this episode. Sadly, I had a computer crash, and we lost the original recording of this. So I know it actually is going to be even better than the first one. And the good news is that we're able to do this. So, but let's hop in, man. Give us a super quick recap from episode 1, and then take us on into the next section on the roots.
Awesome. Yeah. So the overarching concept that we're talking about is this idea of raising up children with roots and wings. And as Sam said, this stuff we coach with entrepreneurs and have sometimes entire companies that go through this content with us. And it is so crazy how you can just take the word, child and it changes into the word teammate or employee or because all these principles are really the same. And the overarching concept of roots and wings is this: that if you raise up children that are missing wings, you give them roots, you give them connections, you give them core values, but you miss the wing side of things, you don't give them capability and courage, then you end up with kids that love you a lot, that want to stick around, that want to be by you all the time. Unfortunately, they want to be by you until they're 35, playing Xbox in the basement with no plans to get out in the future and no, just no ambition.
Right.
And On the other side, if you really focus on the wing side, but you miss the root side of things, what you end up is that you teach children how to be anti-fragile. You teach children how to actually get stronger from challenges rather than breaking from them. You create children that learn how to create value in the world. They learn how to like hunt for value. They learn how to solve problems, and they become these amazing little world changers that go out and start businesses and start charities and just do things that legitimately change the world, but they don't come home for Christmas and they don't come home for Thanksgiving, and you don't get to see them.
Hmm.
And so what we want is we want children that grow up with roots and wings, that are capable, that go out and do amazing things, but also that they, into their adult years want to spend time together with you. And so that's really what we're going for. And as Sam said so eloquently, it totally applies to business as well, right? If you have staff, if you have employees, if you have teammates, and they don't develop wings and they've got roots, then you've got the equivalent of that 35-year-old in the basement. You've got somebody that's
Hmm.
not getting better, not learning. They're just sticking around and they're here collecting, participation trophies for how long they've been here.
Right.
And everyone around is like, why is this person even here? They're not adding any value,
Hmm.
and they're bringing the culture down. On the flip side, if you raise up teammates and you give them wings and not roots, then they attend events and they're listening to podcasts like this one and they're becoming somebody worth buying from. And then unfortunately, you train them up and they go to another company and they become the sales leader there.
Hmm.
So we need roots and wings, and this applies to family and applies to business. We're going to talk mostly through the lens of family today, but they are very interchangeable.
Hmm. Absolutely. You know, it's funny. It makes me. There's an expression in the trades that I've heard for years. I think I heard it one of the very first years that I started 20 years ago. It's the adage is, you know, people business owners are a lot of times kind of resistant or apprehensive about training their people, but the adage is, well, if I train them, what if they leave? But then the question right after that is, yeah, but what if you don't train them and they stay, which is worse, right? So I love this, and so for everybody that's heard that adage, this is exactly what is needed to tie that together. So let's train them and keep them. There's one word that ties this all together is culture, right? Culture is this. We hear so much about creating a culture in a company, and I love this so much because how do we create a culture within our family? So take it away, Jimmie.
Yeah, I love that. There's actually a book called The Culture Code, and one of the statements in it is, I think it's 19 words. I'll probably butcher it a little bit here, but it's basically, I'm giving you this feedback because I have high expectations and I'm confident you can reach them.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
it's this combination of both giving somebody high expectations and high support. And that's really, what you want to be able to create a great culture. And I think culture about what, right? Like, there's lots of people that have culture and it's written on a wall somewhere. They have some values that are written down somewhere, but nobody ever talks about them. The owner can't even really remember what they are. And it's just a plaque on a wall somewhere, which is very, very different from having stories that are codified that people tell and share on an ongoing basis. So we're going to jump into the roots side of things. So there is roots and wings. The root side of thing is connection and core values. In the last episode, we talked about connection. Today, we're going to talk about core values. And then on the wing side of things, we have capability and courage. So capability and courage is how you build up wings inside of children and teammates to where they're not afraid to go headfirst into challenges, to where they've got capability to get things done.
Mhm.
So we're going to talk today again about the roots side of things. And on the root side of things, it's core values and it's connection. And if you nail this part and you have the core values, but you don't spend time together in the family. Sam said it before, go back and listen to that episode. One of the a question that I love is, are you a businessman with a family or are you a family man with a business? What is the priority? And there's times in my life where I've taken a look and said, how much money have I spent on personal development courses? How much time have I spent going to workshops and seminars about how to get better at sales or about how to get better at marketing or leadership? And then how much time have I actually spent implementing into my family? How many family books have I read?
Hmm.
A tip we'll give you on another episode is there's a difference between being a coach and a caretaker to your children. This is more of a capability or a courage thing, but get coaching books, not parenting books, if you want to really elevate your children. But the question from you is how much time am I actually spending on that? So go back and take a look at that episode because it's really easy to say, family is the most important to me. I do it all for my family. And that's what the slogan is that sounds good to the rest of the world. But if you actually stop and ask your family, like, is this what the life that you would choose? If the answer is no, or if your bank statement and your calendar aren't in alignment with that statement, then you're missing it. So, core values without connection is like having the roots of a tree and a dead tree. No life, no fruit on the tree. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. So go back, check out that first episode. Today we're going to dive into roots and we're going to talk a lot really about core values and creating what I would call true legacy. And in fact,
Hmm.
roots and wings together is what true legacy is. The word legacy is actually, I think, been hijacked. When you think about legacy, or when I think about legacy, usually I think about like somebody who's a financial planner and they're saying legacy, but what they mean is inheritance.
Hmm.
That's what they actually mean. So we're going to dive into the root side of things and talks about some core values. Anything you want to say on that, Sam?
No, I feel like that's we've got a good setup here for really getting into it, and it, every single time that you say that expression, that I've heard it from you, in our conversations as well as on the podcast, is, are you a family man with a business or a businessman with a family? God, it hits me so heavy because and for everybody, if you don't own the business, if you're the salesperson or whatever, I've been there. I've been in the grind. My wife used to say every May, okay, I'm the air conditioner widow for another summer. I'll see you in October. And I would leave before the kids were up and I would get home after they were in bed. And I literally didn't see them for days on end. And if you live that life, there is a better way. And so I'm getting emotional just thinking about it now, but it's so important that we have this mindset. And if you miss a couple bucks right now, your kids will never know the difference. But if you're there for them, they will know the difference if you're there or you're not. And so that so I guess there was a little bit I felt like I had to say. So that's it.
Yeah, the air conditioning widow, right? That's heavy, right? And I think oftentimes, especially um, business owners think in terms of investment, not cost. If something's a cost, you're trying to cut it. You got to think about family as an investment. And we're going to talk about that, in a second here. But I think it really comes down to it doesn't have to be huge amounts of times. It has to be systems that you implement in the family, so that you make it easier to do than not to do, and you get it so that the things that are important happen first. And there is a time for grind, and there is a time where um, just the reality is if you have big goals, you're going to have to do what some of the rest of the world isn't willing to do. And if you're doing that, that's great, but it's easy to get caught up into grind hustle culture.
Hmm.
And my advice is before you jump into that culture of like, let's go, let's get it done, let's make big things happen, you come up with some non-negotiables of what am I not willing to sacrifice?
Right.
See, a big part of the world misses sacrifice completely. They set these giant goals of what they're going to add, and they don't think about what they're going to get rid of, what they're going to
Hmm.
take out, what they're going to sacrifice. Then there's another group of people where sacrifice becomes almost a badge of honor.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you start to sacrifice the things that you should not have sacrificed. And generally, at least in my life, when that's happened, it's been under the guise of it's only for this period.
Hmm.
Hey, honey, For the next 3 months, it's going to be like this. And then 3 years goes by and you miss out on 3 years of memories. You're a dad and you're on Facebook and you see like Facebook memories pop up or you see stories pop up and you realize you weren't there.
Ooh.
How many things just happened and I wasn't part of it? How many of
Hmm.
these core memories do my children have? And I wasn't there for them. Like, oh,
Yeah.
that looked fun. I wasn't even there.
Hmm.
So there is something great about being a producer. We're not saying not be a producer. The quote that you referenced a couple of times that comes from Front Row Dads. Are you a businessman with a family, or are you a family man with a business? And it's just a matter of putting some systems in place that say these things come in first. Because if there's something in your calendar that keeps getting bumped over and over and over again, the thing that keeps getting bumped is the thing that's not a priority.
Yep.
Your partner knows that, your spouse knows that, your kids know that, and you can say whatever lip service you want. If the thing that keeps getting bumped is them, they know they're not the priority. So you got to be real honest with yourself. And I think the next part that we're going to go through here around legacy, I think really is the thing that put all of that into perspective for me. So um, you and I've kind of had this conversation before, so you probably might answer differently now. But if I was to ask you this, a while ago, some months ago or years ago,
Hmm.
and I was to say, when you were to think about like what you want to pass down to your kids, if you were to think about kids and grandkids and having a will or having legacy, like what are some things if you wanted to leave them, money and stuff to be able to get an advantage in life,
Hmm.
what's some stuff that you might want to leave to them?
Well, obviously, money, that's part of it. Have the abundance to make the right choices, to give them some freedom of choice. Um,
So,
you know,
so cash or investments or what?
yeah, probably both. I mean, ideally, when we start thinking about legacy, that word legacy, we think about, creating some sort of passive income to pass to them. Maybe, possibly even some investment properties that would pass that, pay them consistently, stake in a business, could be that, those types of things, alongside that. I mean, ooh, we could make a whole list of things, but, obviously the specific things that of, possessions that are important or valuable that we have. Yeah.
You
You know,
said passive income. So what's some real estate passive income, or give me a specific example?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is for so many people that when we think about real estate, we get down this journey of, if we've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, if you haven't, I highly recommend it. But understanding the difference in asset versus liability is so passing assets to them. So it could be a fourplex, maybe that pays, or depending on where you are in life, maybe even a apartment complex or something, a commercial building, those types of things. Outside of real estate, it could be, maybe you have some sort of creative license for, something that just pays, right? Wrote a
Got it.
song and hey, here's every time it plays on the radio, we get this much. Here's your ownership, right?
Got it. So we got passive income, apartment building or a fourplex, maybe a
Mhm.
stake in a business.
Yeah, trust fund,
Um,
right? Trust fund's always a big hot topic of conversation when it comes to, you know, quote unquote leaving legacy, right? I had friends in college that were, this one specifically, it was a trust fund baby. We hear lots of conversation around trust fund babies, right? What does that actually mean? And everybody wants to leave one, but nobody likes a trust fund baby, right? So where's that? This is the whole dichotomy there.
Right, 100%. Okay, so those are some things to be able to leave, and if you're leaving, some cash flowing businesses or cash flowing, properties. These are comments that I hear very often from people that are building wealth. Um, let's change gears a little bit. What are some traits? What are some characteristics, some character traits
Hmm.
that you would like to instill or leave behind in your children?
Um, compassion, compassion's one. Work ethic. Work ethic is always a big one. Um, attention to detail, those types of things. I think empathy and really one of the things that we really try to instill in our kids is especially right now they're in school, is always be the nicest person in the room. Care for others. Find that person who's sitting alone by themselves and go be their friend. Kind of stick up for the underdog type of mentality. Advocate for what you know is right, even if it's not popular. Those
Mm,
types of things are really important in our family to leave. And then of course the work ethic, the um, you know consistent, persistent discipline. Discipline is a big one. Um, just creating a standards in their own lives that they refuse to compromise on to get them where they want to go.
mm. I love that. And when you're talking about, niceness and being the nicest person in the room and, looking around for who are people that they could, extend an olive branch to or be
Hmm.
there for. Um, it was like that seemed really important or like emotional. What's behind that?
Yeah, it's a lot of it could probably come from where the place where my wife and I, where we grew up. We were those kids, and we were always the ones that were, you know, we made sure, because at one point in our life we were the ones that were alone. And when people showed us that kindness, we always decided to pay it forward
Mm,
and to really turn that around. And there's a principle that everybody listening to the show has heard me say over and over, is always give more value than you take. And
mm,
so a question that I've started asking my kids is, who did you add value to today? Right? Who did you help? Right? Did you see a place where you could help a teacher, another student, those types of things? Because when you, it's, so many different concepts built into this, but if you constantly give value, and then the universe, you can't outgive the universe. And it's the classic Zig Ziglar, right? If you help enough people get what they want, you can have anything you want. And so it's all this ties together into the conversation.
I love that. So we've got compassion, we've got work ethic, empathy. I think empathy and compassion together really kind of talks about what you're talking about there about like seeing where somebody else is and like reaching out to them. We got discipline and being disciplined. Um, so great. So we've got some things to leave that's inheritance, and then we've got some traits to leave. And that this is where I think that the word legacy is hijacked. And if you take a look, according to Forbes, 30% of family fortunes make it to the second generation, meaning that 70% of them are gone.
Wow.
Only 10% make it to the third generation.
Jeez.
So, so by the third generation, statistically speaking, it's all gone.
Wow.
And the reason that I think that that is true is because we focus too much on the inheritance and not enough on the traits. This is why we
Mm.
say heritage over inheritance. It's more important what you leave in your kids than what you leave to your kids. So if you give your children a fourplex and they turn 30 years old or 25 years old and they have a fourplex and they have passive income and they don't have any discipline and they don't have any work ethic because that didn't get passed on, what's the result? Like what does their life look like?
That's a good question. I mean, it sounds like a free ride.
And what do you think? Like what do you think that leads to?
Well, I mean, it could probably lead to. This is a great question. I don't know that I've gone taken my mind down this journey. It could lead to a lack of all of the traits that we talked about. It could. Um, it could lead to you know well, heck, I mean, if they decide that they need a load of cash, they could sell that sucker off and then not have anything, right? Get rid of the passive part of it and have this, you know, stuff, right? It could lead to a lot of things.
So the question for everybody listening is write it down. What happens if I give them blank without blank? What happens if I give them the stuff and money and things without the experience and guidance and wisdom and traits? What happens if you have a business and you've got 20 employees
Hmm.
and they've been putting their blood, sweat, and tears into building this thing with you. And then you hand that business off. And what happens if you miss these traits? What happens
Mm,
if you hand a business off and your children don't have compassion or empathy or work ethic?
mm. This is really interesting you mentioned that because in doing what I do and working with the companies I've worked with across the country, I've seen this happen more than once in this last year, even. I'll go in and we've got the founder there, and it was built great and it was built huge and it was awesome from the founder. And then the kids roll into they age into the company and they're just instantly placed into positions of leadership. And now all of a sudden there's this huge almost revolt from the people who were there as the employees that are in leadership. Maybe the founder's still there, and but he's handed it off, they've handed it off to the kids in between, and nothing gets done, and these businesses are in decline because the leadership goes straight to the founder and bypasses every decision that the kids have made, and it's just this like complete internal conflict all the time, and just see it over and over and over. And so, man, it's not this is nothing new, that's for sure.
So now you've got children that are missing these traits that are in a business that became successful because the owner had all of these traits and went through struggles and went through lessons to be able to build all these skill set up.
Hmm.
And every time we jump in and do something for our kids that they could do for themselves, we rob them of capability.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so all of a sudden now, if we are leaving, whether it's assets, whether it's real estate, whether it's a business, if those traits are missing,
Hmm.
and then things start to not go well because you don't have the skills necessary to maintain,
Right.
that's not a fun life.
Sure. Or maybe even the skills are there, but they didn't get to the position because they've earned it with the leadership team or those kind of things, right? And it's for everybody listening. I'm not talking about any specific company. I just want you to know that if this model fits exactly what's going on in your company, I'm not thinking of anyone particular. I want to make sure to mention that. This is one of those, if the shoe fits, you know, then go internal and figure it out. But just for that clarification there.
Yeah, 100%. And the stat that we referenced is that 70% of the time it doesn't generate, like, this wealth doesn't make it to the next generation. So
Mhm.
probably 70% of the people listening to the podcast who are businesses, are dealing with some part of this. And then you take it a further one more generation down.
Mhm.
So those kids that we didn't spend the time with, right? I'm speaking to myself. How much time did I spend on business that I didn't spend with my kids? And now they're going to be parents and they're going to try to pass down these lessons that I didn't pass down to them.
Mhm.
And then we wonder why 90% of it's gone by the third generation. So this is a recurring thing. And I remember going through this process, and my thought was, man, I got to negotiate some time away from my business that I can put into family, and I got to wrestle some of this time away. And as soon as this happened, as soon as I made some decisions about what are we going to do? Are we going to pay for some of our kids' education or all of it, or some of their first house or none of it, or some of their first car or all of it or none of it? And spending some time going through that process and then realizing, like, what happens if we pass on the stuff without the traits. I was like, I don't actually know what I want to pass down and what I want to put into a trust and what I want to not. But what I do know is that even I put something into a trust that my kids can't touch and they get to, you know, donate the money, they're gonna have fake friends their whole life that are trying to get to be their friends so that they can impact where money gets donated to,
Mhm.
right? So I'm like, I cannot have them grow up without the traits that are important. And kind of going through that process was like, it's not that I have to negotiate some time away from my business to do family. It's like, if I want true legacy, it is so much more about what I leave in them than what I
Mhm.
leave to them.
Mm. So powerful.
So I hear stuff all the time, and especially financially, especially people that are first generation money. And I hear them say stuff like, if you do this, then your child can have a fourplex by the time they're 18, or if you do that, they can. And they're talking about literally, they say the words, "Make my child a millionaire."
Hmm.
Make my child a millionaire. And I've heard you reference this quote before of go make $1 million, not because of the money, but because of the person you become in the process.
Right.
If you understand that lens and that frame, making somebody a millionaire is literally robbing them of the person they will become in the process.
Right.
So let's dive in a little bit into let's talk about values and how do you actually like build this and do this. There's really three things we're going to talk about. One of them is stories, one of them is core values, and one of them is inner circle. So those kind of three things are really what make up this idea of core values. And a lot of times people when they look at core values, either for a business or for their home, the way that they do it is they look at a list. They Googled or they chat GPT, what's a list of values? And then they just like circle ones that are like, that sounds noble.
Yeah.
And that's what they get,
Especially with AI now.
especially with AI.
ChatGPT is the cheat code for everybody at this point. And if it's
Uh,
not, it will be.
100%. So the problem with that though is that you're like selecting things that sound nice. A
Hmm.
much better way to identify core values is to write down some stories and to say, what are some stories in the family, or if you're owner, what are some stories in the business that drove me up the wall? In business, one of the things for me is resourcefulness.
Hmm.
When somebody comes to me and they have a bunch of questions, and I'm like, have you Googled this yet? Like, where else
Right.
could you find this answer? This is a $5 an hour question. Why are you asking me about it? It drives me nuts.
Hmm.
And that's like something that story after story after story, it's like it's something that drives me up the wall. And so I know that resourcefulness needs to be one of the values.
Hmm.
Uh, and learn from Dan Martell from Buy Back Your Time, the 131 principle, which is when somebody has a problem, it's one problem, three suggestions, and one recommendation. So come to me with one problem, not 11 problems. We're going to have one problem per conversation. I want three solutions. I want you to do the mental work of coming up with three solutions. And I used to stop there. And then people would come to me with three suggestions and they'd be like, okay, tell me what to do.
Hmm.
And it was still missing them taking ownership. It was still missing some resourcefulness. One suggested action, one recommendation changes all that because now they have to do the mental thinking of here's what I think we should do and here's why.
Hmm.
So the place that you want to start with values is what are some stories? What are some stories of when something was really good and I felt amazing? And what are some stories of some times where like emotionally it just like upset me the most? And what was missing? What was the value that was missing? You
Hmm.
mentioned empathy before, right? So you can see a situation and say, man, what was missing is there was no empathy here. Something with our kids that came up with is KCR, kind, respectful, and calm. So when they're like yelling or fighting with each other, or almost any time when something would like make my blood boil, it was like, oh,
Hmm.
this is either not kind, or it's not respectful, or it's not calm. You're screaming about this when it could be just a calm conversation.
Calm conversation. Yeah.
And so it takes some mental work to figure that out. But once you do, you can call it out and kids can actually start to learn from it. So the first step is coming up with some stories for a core value acronym. I love, by the way, having an acronym. Your core values are only as useful to you as how often they are stated and remembered.
Mm.
You can have the seven greatest values on the planet. If nobody can remember them, who cares?
Right. It's
Right?
like what's the old adage that a short pencil's better than a long memory. If it's not written down, it never really happened.
100%. So in business, something we reference in our sales team all the time is the acronym GROW. And GROW stands for gratitude, resourcefulness, ownership, and winning. Everybody can remember it. because it's 4 words. It's actually five because the word grow is one of the values. We value growth, both personal growth, and the idea that every time that you take action, even if you don't get the result you want, you either get external growth and things go the way you want and you make more money and more profit, or it didn't go the way you wanted. But if you take the time to look at the lesson, you get internal growth and you get better. So grow is an example. And a story is my buddy Tim Francis. There was a number of years ago, he went to a training and it was just learning a business skill. And he went and I went and we both loved it. And at the end of the $500 training, they pitched the $20,000 training. And so if you've ever been in the personal development space, you know what I'm talking about. And he was like, dude, this is what I need to go to
Mhm.
the next level. Didn't have the 20 grand, this young guy, and decided that he would raise the money. And he pre-sold 4 coaching spots for $5,000 each to people. And he said, I'm going to go learn this stuff. I'm going to come back and I'm going to coach with you until you feel like you got this percentage of an ROI. And they gave him the money and he went off to this event. And I actually recommended some people to him, some business owners to him. And he gets to this $20,000 event, like just eager to learn, ready to go.
Mhm.
And
Let's take it to
it
the
was
next level, right?
take it to the next level. It was not the next level. It was the exact same workbook from the $500 event. It was the exact same content from the $500 event. And
Jeez.
they just kept talking the whole time about how, soon you're going to learn the magic. And the magic just never came.
Mhm. Yeah, man, that's rampant in home services and HVAC right now. That's for sure.
So he comes back from the event and tries his best to honor the agreements, goes and coaches these people with the best visibility. And kind of one by one, they just, stopped showing up for calls and weren't getting a bunch of value. And a couple years later, Tim goes back to them and he says, hey, I've learned marketing and I've learned this other skill. I don't feel like you got $5,000 worth of value from me. I'm going to work for you for free until you feel like you have got an ROI.
Wow. That's integrity right there.
That's integrity 100%. And for me, that's him taking ownership. And that's
Mhm.
an example we use of taking ownership. And I can recommend anything that that guy ever does because even if I make the wrong decision or he makes the wrong decision, I know that he's going to make it right. And
Mhm.
so that's somebody that I want to be in business with. That's somebody that I want in my inner circle. So that's an example of a story. And I put that beside a story of somebody who's like just not taking ownership. They're complaining about how whatever they're late for work and they're late for work because they couldn't get parking. But the truth is that they left 5 minutes late, thinking they could make up the 5 minutes on the drive, and then they got there 1 minute late, and then there wasn't parking, and now they were 10 minutes late.
Right.
Right. Taking ownership is like, maybe I should be here 15 minutes early and create enough space that even if something goes wrong, that I'm still here on time.
Right.
Stories like that go so much further with teams and with your family than a list of things on the wall.
Mhm.
So that's an example. For family, Scott Donnell, who is a friend and partner of mine, teaches families all around the world this type of stuff. I think it's impacted 7 million families now. Inside of his family, the acronym is Faith, Family, and Fish.
Mhm.
And Fish stands for fun and adventure, integrity, service, and hard work. So his 3-year-old at the dinner table, they can be like, "What's the Donald's about?" And they can be like, "Faith, family, fish." What does fish stand for? Fun and adventure, integrity, or integrity. Can't even say it right yet. Hard work, right? And service and hard work. So it's got to be simple like that. And so you start off with stories and you figure out what are some of these stories that are meaningful. Then you codify the stories. You say, what is the value inside of the story? And you make sure you don't tell the story without sharing the value.
Mhm.
Otherwise, your stories over generations will get twisted around because people have their own agendas and things like that. So you have to codify it and say, this is the principle, this is the story, this is the point of this story.
Hmm.
And Scott always says the if you want to kill a family culture, the fast way is to kill the chief storyteller.
Ooh.
So we have to learn to tell stories. You use stories to come up with what the values are, and then you once you know what the values are, you reinforce those values over and over and over
Hmm.
by telling and retelling stories.
Wow, that's you hadn't said that before, and it my brain just instantly recognized thinking about families, and when you're talking about when the chief storyteller dies off. So, I'm thinking about, my, say, grandparents when they died. So many of I'm getting emotional thinking about this. So many of the family stories were lost and forgotten, and that they were the ones that held everybody together. They were the reason that our family would come together once or twice a year to and see each other. And now that they've been gone for so many years, we haven't. I mean, my mom had you know heart surgery last week, and so my aunt and my cousin came to be there, and I haven't seen them in years, where we used to see them at least once a year. And my aunt was retelling some of the stories, and it was really interesting because there was a few of them. She's like, I think that's what it used to be.
Mm.
And whew, talking about hit home.
Yeah, and you look around the world, right? And you wonder why we're closer than ever before to World War III. It's because all the people that lived World War II, those storytellers
Hmm.
are passing away.
Right.
And people don't know what it's actually like, what it actually means when you play stupid games.
Whew, no kidding.
So, an example in business, I gave you one around ownership. Um, Ours is winning is one of them, and winning doesn't mean winning. So in grow, winning doesn't mean just like we win all the time. All I do is win, 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 no matter what. That's not what we're talking about.
Okay, hands in the air, right? Hands go up.
What we're talking about is a winning culture.
Hmm.
What we're talking about is when we're listening to a sales call, we're listening to it the same way that a championship team would watch game tape.
Yeah.
We're going back, we're looking at it. If we have to give a rating on a sales call around tonality and control.
Hmm.
And when we are going through that, the easy thing to do is to be like, oh, 9 and 9, great job. But that doesn't serve anybody.
No.
That's not right. So we got to be able to have the hard conversations that you would have in a winning culture. So that's from a business standpoint. At home, in the Jayes family, it is grace. Grace is the acronym. So it's gratitude, it's respect, it's adventure, it's courage, and empathy. And each one of those words, we literally have like, here's 20 different definitions of courage. Here's what courage means. Sometimes
Hmm.
we're on a road trip and literally like handed over to my son. He's 14 now, and we were going off to a little time with him and I to a different city. Went to an event together, and I was like, "All right, courage. Here's the list. Read through it. Here's the different definitions. You can either give me a you can either give me a story about courage that matches that definition. I can give you a story that matches that definition, or you can ask me a question about it
Hmm.
and go." And we just had just amazing conversation. And you can literally use ChatGPT to make some of these questions. But one of the definitions is choosing to act despite fear.
Hmm.
Courage is taking action even when it feels scary. Standing up for what's right. That's an example of courage. Being vulnerable. Courage involves sharing your true self even when it feels risky. Believing in yourself. It's having the confidence in who you are even if others don't see it. Making hard choices. It's a willingness to choose the harder path when it's the right one.
Hmm.
Embracing change, forgiving when it's hard, staying hopeful, accepting help is an example of courage. Loving deeply is an example of courage, right? It's fully loving even when you have the risk of loss, getting back up. choosing to rise up every time life knocks you down. So we can have these conversations around, hey, tell me a story about sometime where you've witnessed that or you've been that, or
Hmm.
I'll tell you a story, or you can ask me a question about it. And we're just spending time together going through and doing things like this. So because it's the word grace, it's very easy for them to remember what the words are. And again, grace is another one of the words. So we get to kind of have an extra hidden word in there with grace being the acronym. So it takes some time to come up, with what this is. But you want to start off by kind of coming up with some stories. Then from there, you want to look and say, what are the values? Then you want to take those values and make it easy to remember and then codify your stories.
Hmm.
And you're basically collecting stories, then you're codifying stories, then you're sharing stories, and the last step is attracting, which we'll talk about in a second. But I've been talking for too long, so what's something that's standing out for you in all of that?
So there's a lot that stood out. I think the biggest one is, having as a parent, and I think from because my kids are 13 and 11 right now, and from not doing this, there's the courage really hits me because there's a piece of me that is, almost apprehensive to start this process now, even though that hasn't been our norm. It hasn't been what we do. And so, I'm feeling a little bit of hesitance there, but also this is where courage comes in, is to, open that conversation with them, because the family or family dynamic is not necessarily to have, we'll have some board game times, but we don't have a regular set schedule. Will have times for different things, but we don't have a family meeting. We try for family dinner, but there's not a consistent time that we do that. It's definitely, at least up to this point, not a consistent set time in the schedule where we get together and have meaningful discussions as a family. And so there's a little piece of me that's like, well, it's in the back of my brain that's saying, well, what if we start this and everybody hates it? What if we
Mm,
start this and it doesn't work? And but I have to remember with the courage is, like was it the John Wayne quote? It's like, courage is being, scared to death but saddling up anyway. And I have to remember to what if up instead of what
mm,
if down. Instead of what if nobody likes it, what if nobody participates, is yeah, but what if they do? You know,
mm,
what if, we get into this conversation and it connects us like we've never been connected, right?
mhm.
So that's the piece that really stood out to me.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I think it's like you just got to start where you're at. And I love the reframe of like instead of what if this doesn't work, like what if it works even better than we even thought. Um, and there's another reframe that Tim Ferriss says a lot, which is most people overanalyze to death the risk of change and completely ignore the risk of staying the same.
Mm,
So another what if question is like, what if they hate this? Okay, well, what if we don't do it?
mm,
Because I think a lot of times as parents, what we try to do is we're trying to protect our children from things. But the problem is, for anybody who played video games like I did as a kid, there's games where you'd play the game and you'd collect XP and your character would get stronger. And then you get to
hmm.
boss fights and you could do those. And if you missed the little battles when you got to the boss fight, you were in trouble. You didn't stand a chance.
Yeah, they handed it right back to you, and you had to start over.
100%. And so what happens with our kids is we're right beside them and we're stealing their XP.
Mm,
They have these little battles and we jump in and say, I got that for you. Let me take care of this. I don't like when you're feeling sad, right? And we steal the XP
hmm.
and we think that we're protecting them, but all we're doing is weakening them so that when they face big problems, real challenges, harder things, right? They don't have the necessary XP
Mm.
that they need.
Ooh.
So that's one thing I would say. Another thing that I would say is when I say like grace, when I say gratitude, respect, adventure, courage, empathy, I'm not saying this is the list of things that my family is great at. I'm saying this is what we aspire to.
Sure.
We are working on respect. We are working on empathy.
Hmm.
But we can work on it because we talk about it and say this is what it means and this is the vision that we have,
Hmm.
and we can start, putting that time in. So I think that's a really important distinction, because when we were going through and building this, my wife was like, I don't know if I feel comfortable telling people that these are our words, because I feel like we're not great at this one and I'm not great at that one. It's the thing that we want to aspire to,
Hmm.
and the standard that we want to hold each other to. And so I think that's something I would say about that. And the last thing that I would say is when you said, we don't have a bunch of time together, we don't have these conversations or as many dinners as we'd like, or I think a lot of time there's a book called The Gap and the Gain,
Hmm.
and it talks
Love
about
that book.
measuring, yeah, it talks about measuring yourself against your ideal versus measuring yourself against your progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you listen to a podcast, you get fired up, and you're like, yeah, dinners, we're going to do 5 a week. But bro, you're going to go from 0 a week to 5 a week,
Right.
right? How can
Sounds
you
like
go
a
to
recipe for disaster right there.
totally? So how can you go to 1 a week, and how can you systematize the 1 a week, make it repeatable so that it's easier to do than not to do?
Hmm.
The way that we did that is ordered chef's plate, and we said we're going to do 3 days a week. That's chef plate. And on this day, this child helps Candace, my wife. On this day, the other child helps Candace. And on
Hmm.
this day, Jimmie cooks. And it's in the schedule,
Hmm.
and it's 3 days a week. And sometimes we have more than those meals together, but those are the ones that are in the calendar. And so, again, if you're at 0, for anybody listening, like go to 1, right? Find what's the smallest thing that you can build momentum with. One of my favorite quotes is that most people overemphasize the power of goals and miss the power of momentum.
Ooh.
Right? When you see a football team and they're down by 40 points, and they get a sack and they're like slamming helmets, and you're like, that you're still down by 40, right? Like you didn't even score. What are you doing? It's intentional. They understand momentum,
Hmm.
right? They did something good. They're building on it. They're building energy around it. And then they're going to go get the next win and the next win and the next win and the next win. That is how you build progress. And every single coaching scenario I've been in, the people that are the most capable have the biggest problem with this,
Hmm.
because they're like, I'm really capable. And so I'm going to have a big goal. Listen, if you're in momentum, if your business has been growing like quarter over quarter over quarter, double digit compounded growth, set some insane goal, set the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Hmm.
If you're not in momentum, and maybe you're in momentum in the business, but you're not in momentum in the family, or maybe in the family, you're in momentum in the connection side and you have lots of time together and lots of love together, but the courage side of like building anti-fragile kids and letting them grow from mistakes, maybe that's not in momentum. Okay, we'll do something really, really small,
Hmm.
not something huge, and just start the habit of doing that small thing. And pretty soon you got momentum. And then pretty soon you start hitting goals that you thought weren't even possible.
Wow. I love this. For everybody that's listening, the episode that I just released in fact, this past Monday, um, no, Monday last week, which is the dates mean nothing to everybody here because this is the podcast and it's recorded. But a couple episodes ago, we actually dove into this. It's the episode where we were talking about goals are dead. Like what are we really doing here? And I, in that episode, we really got granular on setting how to get into the momentum and setting goals around your sales numbers and stuff. But I love how this applies to everything in life. It's not just this one business KPI that we're tracking that we have to, let's set these goals and create momentum around. It's everything. It applies to our lives in a way that we've never really thought about it applying before.
Awesome. We've got one more part for roots. Do we have time for it?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I am loving this message, and these concepts are, it's interesting. I love these concepts because they're things that when we really think about it, we already know mostly, but just in a different context. And it's forcing me to like really pick it up off of a completely different concept, and we're setting it on top of the family, and it's just so cool how it correlates, and it's like this huge light bulb moment of like, boom, this just makes sense. Why weren't we doing this before? And so thank you for bringing this message to us, because it's one that we definitely need to hear. But yeah, we absolutely have time for one more that I know will help everybody.
Awesome. So we were just talking about courage, and we were talking about it because it's one of the core values of our family. But there's also some of the stuff we're talking about in courage. Stay tuned and show up on the next podcast drop. We've already recorded it, and it is literally about the wings side of things, and it's about that topic of courage and not being XP stealers and raising anti-fragile kids. And there's a difference between fragile and resilient and anti-fragile.
Mm,
Resilient means that we don't break easily. It's not fragile. Anti-fragile is not the same as resilience. Anti-fragile means that when there's stress, when there's problems, when there's challenges, not only do I not break, not only am I resilient, I actually get stronger from them.
mm,
The human immune system is an example of a system that is anti-fragile. The more that it comes into contact with like bacteria and the more that it like has stress, the stronger and better it gets. And that's how we want our kids to be. So that's a different episode. Um, but talking here about kind of the root side of things and talking about core values, we kind of started off from this place of like what is legacy, because it's been hijacked. And legacy,
mm,
what it really meant, years ago, and when you're talking about like leaving an inheritance for your children's children, what it means is like leaving land and skills. Give them the ability to work. That's what it
mhm.
is, not leaving them a bunch of stuff. And so we kind of talked about how, if the idea is to leave all of this stuff, then there's a very good chance, a 90% chance that 3 generations from now, all of the sacrifices that you're making, all of the work that you're doing is squandered. And not only did you lose it, but your children may be worse off because of it.
Mhm.
They might be in a situation where you look at people that are celebrities, you look at people that win a lottery. How often are they like in rehab? Because not only did the money not help them, it actively worked against them, where they had addiction, they had problems, they had stuff that happened. So if you give your kids things without traits, you're in for a problem. We talked about what's the process of giving them those traits. How do you instill those core values? And it really comes down to 3 things. One of them is stories, one of them is core values,
Mhm.
and one of them is inner circle. So the process here is that you come up with the real core values, not the ones that sound nice on a sheet of paper. You do that by going through and codifying, and all of this stuff we do in our workshops, and we like literally walk you through the process of going through how do you come up with a story, how do you codify the story, how do you tell the story in a way where the core value really sticks and hits. Um, and come out, the other end with here's what, our family acronym is, here's what our family crest looks like. And, you've got your own version of faith, family, and fish or grace or whatever that is for you. And it's like Donald's do hard things, or you got some bumper stickers of like little phrases that you can just say around your family. And when you have kids, that's what they need in
Mhm.
order for stuff to be able to sink in.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I could tell you one of our bumper stickers here is success happens at the speed of implementation. So,
I've heard that many times from you, and it's
word.
very true. So the next part is around creating an inner circle, and this is important for a couple of reasons. It's really part of that feedback cycle and loop is as you have better and better people in your inner circle that are more and more aligned with your core values, Those people create stories. Tim Francis, somebody's in my inner circle, and I legitimately tell stories of him to my son, and he can learn about and from Tim.
Hmm.
The second reason this is important is because of this idea about how children have different phases of learning that they go through. There's a phase of learning that I call the absorber phase. This is when your kids are 0 to 6. Observation and imitation is the primary way that children learn. So if you have young kids, that's how they learn. They learn by observing you. And so you can't have a list of things on the wall and say, here's the core values of the family and not live them, because they care more about observation and imitation than they do about what you have to say.
Hmm.
So storytelling games are really useful things, and that's the absorber phase. 7 to 12 is the explorer phase. This is when your kids are exploring the world. Curiosity and like experiences is
Hmm.
how they learn. You've got like a 7-year-old and they're like, why? Is how they learn. They're
Hmm.
hardwired to do that. Hands-on training, thinking, exploration, that's how they learn. Um, my son's 14, so he's in the challenger phase, right? 13 to 18, kids are hardwired, and the way that they learn is through critical thinking, and they learn through social,
Hmm.
like other people. And they're literally hardwired to challenge you. They're hardwired for independence. They're hardwired for questioning authority. And it's not that they're being disrespectful. It's literally the way that they learn. They have to learn not to just listen and listen and listen and do what they're told. They have to learn by doing something
Hmm.
and facing the natural consequence. And if we remove the natural consequence, they miss the learning.
Right.
Fourth stage is self directed learners. If you do the first three stages right, if you build a family with roots and wings, your relationship with your kids, you get to be their mentor, and that gets to continue in life. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be this thing where it ends because now they're grown up. It's this beautiful mentorship role. And there's a family called the Tims, and they do Mentor Mondays. They have the most amazing children, and they're like in their 20s. And Mark Tim is just like every Monday, kids come back home, we do Mentor Monday, and they just ask me questions and I guide them. Like that's the relationship that I want
Yeah.
with my kids long term. So those are the different stages. And the way this relates to this idea of inner circle is when your children reach the challenger stage. And by the way, if they're not there yet, the time that you want to prepare for this is now.
It's true.
Okay. It is now. Because what happens is in the challenger stage, they don't listen to you. Not only do they not listen to you, whatever you say almost works against whatever point you're trying to make because they are hardwired to challenge you. And so at that phase, the parenting, the best thing you can do for your children in the absorbers phase is like stories and games, right? The best thing that you can do in the challengers phase is you can get other people around your children that are mentors.
Mm.
You can do whatever it is you want, but understand the people that are going to have the most impact and the most influence on your children is not you.
Hmm.
And it will be someone. It can be the person that they met online playing video games. It can be somebody that you don't put in their path intentionally, or it can be that they're learning from the inner circle that they now like and trust that you intentionally created.
Hmm.
And that process of saying, well, who's in the inner circle? Well, that comes down to what are your core values?
Right.
So once you have the core values, you can start to say, who are people that meet this? And it's crazy how often my inner circle happens as a result of convenience and not as a result of intentionality.
Ooh.
There's amazing people, and we're not using access to them properly. I remember we talked on the last episode about dinner views, I think. But I remember being, 23 years old, how much work I would go through to be able to get in the midst of somebody who was successful, which was
Right.
probably they made 100 grand. And I would like buy them dinner, even though I didn't have the money. And I would come with a list of questions and I would obsess over it.
Hmm.
And then, I'm with my son now, and we go over to a friend's house. He's built $1 billion in sales, 1.1 billion now in the solar industry, and we have some time together. And the question that my son asks him is, "Hey, can I have a Pepsi?" And that's not a failure of my son. That's a failure of mine. I
Right.
haven't taught him what questions to ask when you have an opportunity like this,
Hmm.
right? And so thinking about who are these people, how can we be more intentional about being around them? And especially if you have people that are in your inner circle that have kids, like mentor each other's kids,
Hmm.
right? It's an opportunity for them to learn from somebody else. And the craziest thing is when they come back from hearing some mentorship and they're like, Dad, you're never going to believe it. This person said blank. And you're like, I've said that to you 75 times in the last 3 weeks. You just smile and go, oh, wow, that's amazing. Tell me more about it. How did you
Right.
learn that? What does that mean to you?
Hmm.
And let them teach you and watch how easy the conversation is, watch how much it sticks.
Hmm.
And um, those types of things are also preparing them for the rest of their lives to say, who's in my inner circle
Yeah.
and really locking in on those values. So if you want to create kids that have both roots and wings, a big part of it is knowing what those core values are, having stories that are codified, having something that's easy to remember that these are what the values are, and having an inner circle of people that exemplify those values where you're constantly calling out and creating new stories. When your kids do things, one of ours is empathy. Our son was having a problem with gratitude, and I kept trying to like teach gratitude, teach gratitude, teach gratitude. You can't teach gratitude to somebody who has limited experience.
True.
His gratitude is only as good as the range of what he's been able to see in his life.
Hmm.
And we went and did some volunteering together. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to buy a drink, and I'm also going to buy a bottle of water because the person who's eating this probably doesn't have clean water to wash their hands with."
Oh, wow.
That's empathy.
Yeah.
And that happened because we went and did something together, not because of some lecture that I'd given 52 times that hadn't worked about gratitude, right? It's doing that, and then it's calling that story out over and over and over in our family as an example of what it
Mhm.
looks like to have empathy.
I love this so much. I, f- I feel like have been living in my head for a while because I've been having this conversation with my 11 and 13-year-old about gratitude and about gratitude and about gratitude and about gratitude. And it's funny because I guess we're traveling parallel paths, and we haven't, for everybody listening, Jimmy and I have not discussed this portion of it. And even recently, we were like, you know what? We have a really good friend. We helped found a nonprofit that feeds school kids over the weekend. It's called Backpack Friends, and so we're putting a plan in place together to go help them, pack backpacks to, give underprivileged kids that don't have food over the weekend. And so we're on this similar path, but it's until that happens, it's just words until the actions like match up with that, right?
If their range of experience is today I did well in video games and yesterday I did poorly in video games, their gratitude can it's not all of gratitude, but it's a portion of gratitude
Hmm.
that can only extend those two boundaries, right? And as soon as it's like, oh yeah, there's somebody else who they don't have food and the only place they get food is at school, and if it wasn't for backpack friends,
Hmm.
like they wouldn't get food at all. And so we're going to help so that they have some food over the weekend. All of a sudden, like that becomes on their scale, and the scale gets magnified dramatically, and all of a sudden the distance between did well in video games and did poorly in video games used to be this huge difference, and now it's like those two things are pretty close together, and like way down on the list is like what it would feel like to not know where food is coming from.
Right.
And now you can have a bad video game day and still have gratitude because your experience list has been brought in. And lots of times we miss that. The kids just don't have a level of experience, and we're trying to teach them through our lens of our especially business owners or entrepreneurs where it's like, yeah, I lived through not knowing where rent was going to come from. And now we live in the house that we do and drive the car that we do. And why aren't you more grateful? It's a, well, because they weren't there for that part of your story.
Right.
They don't know what that feels like. And so it's just an opportunity to, find ways to be able to go do things and call them out. And when you do it, make sure that you codify that story and you tell it over and over, so that it like gets passed down. And we're at the point now where my 14-year-old is telling stuff to my 10-year-old, and it's just amazing to watch. Like, oh, you guys are teaching each other this stuff.
Hmm. I love it. Oh, so, so, so good. I wish we could talk about this for much, much longer, which of course, for everybody that's listening, we have two more sessions coming, two more episodes. So we are talking about it a good about more, but a good amount further. Uh, and this is really honestly just the tip of the iceberg. I know when we were setting this up that, we're talking about covering these things at a very, very, very high level. But tell everybody where they can learn more, how they can dive in and truly, get connected to you and what you're doing, and how they can really find the right path and the systems to pull this into their own family dynamic and to create those, anti-fragile kids with roots and wings.
Yeah, 100%. So we are launching a an updated website at fig and eagle .com. The fig tree has the deepest roots of any tree. It's goes down further than the Eiffel Tower goes up, and the eagle has strong wings and is a very, very interesting storm behaviors that eagles have. So that is figandeagle.com. You can go there and check us out. And if you are if you're a family person and you want to just implement the stuff into your family, we've got workshops and things that we do on an ongoing basis. And if you own a business and you're like, man, wouldn't it be great if all of the staff here were thinking in terms of what is our core values and telling
Mm,
stories? Our staff was looking to find stories and codify them and share them around. And
right.
our staff was looking for how do we like not remove challenges? How do we look and think like an entrepreneur, right? Think
Hmm.
about solving problems, thinking about hunting for value. What would that do? Well, we do these trainings just like this one for companies, and we do it through the lens of family. And at the end of it, you now have shared language that you can use at work
Mm,
with employees about these exact same things, about having roots and wings around the business, around having healthy struggles, and what that means. So
yeah.
that's where you can go to check it out. And yeah, would love to have you and to take this conversation deeper if you're digging what we're learning so far. And like Sam said, there's two more podcasts that are dramatically different. We're talking about the root side of things, the wing side of things. Are like 180 degrees opposite, and you need both if you want kids that do great things in the world and also stick around and want to be near you.
Right. So, 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 so good. As you were going through that, I can imagine that even if you didn't have the company business conversation, but you were to, really go through this with a company, how much better and in what power would the employees show up if this is being implemented at home with their family? Right, to solve some family issues. For everybody that's listening, sales is not the performance of an hour, it's the overflow of a life. Right, your life is what determines your sales numbers. Right, your life is what determines your business growth. Your life is what determines how well you show up on a day after day basis. And if things are screwed at home, it's gonna cost you, right? So that's why Jimmie is on this show, because we know there's so many more things to success. Success is a big umbrella. What does success look like to you? So, man, thanks for being on the show. This has been a pleasure. I am so grateful. Functioning in gratitude here. I'm definitely grateful that we connected years ago, and that you are I'm so stoked for you on this journey and grateful that you've brought it to share with the Close It Now community. And we don't take it lightly. And so for everybody that's listening, go to figandeagle.com. I did as well. I signed up for the newsletter, signed up on the email list, and go do it because you deserve to have not only success in your business but also success in your family and your relationships. And so and for everybody that's driving in Drive Time University, it will be in the show notes as well. So go click the link in the show notes. Man, last words, and then we're going to sign off here.
Man, it's just been great spending this time together with you. And if I was to sum up the last words, it would be just around the idea that we said earlier, which is what you leave in your kids is a lot more important than what you leave to them, and what you leave in them happens daily.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, man. So for everybody listening, you know how we sign off, and this is actually could not end with a better topic. So everybody out there, go be someone worth buying from.